Hi, my friends, greetings. We are going to be dealing with the last session of this fantastic civilization of Africa, ancient Egypt, and we are coming now to the New Kingdom period, one of the most astonishing and remarkable period of the ancient Egyptian history. So you remember, my friends, I just a bit of background. You remember that Hyksos had invaded Egypt, and they ruled in Egypt, especially the lower Egypt part, from 1750 to 1570, right? Okay, so this is the background that I want you to keep in mind. So the Hyksos have come already into Egypt, right, at the end of the Middle Kingdom period, i.e., foreign, yeah. Egypt comes out of its isolation, right? The foreign, Egypt begins to get, right, at the end of the New Kingdom period, right, connected to uh, Syria, Palestine, and connected to what Mesopotamia, as we will see. So this connection, right, and then there comes the intermediate period, during which period the Hyksos are second intermediate period, during which time the Hyksos are ruling in the second intermediate period, right? So you come to the New Kingdom, right, with an Egypt that becomes connected to the outside world, and Egypt and now we will see what we will later on see what this outside world looks like, right? Um, but um, but this is the age of empires, right? Great empires, and Egypt becomes one of them, right? So becoming connected to the outside world, right? It means that the Egyptians adopted the war technology, new warfare technology that Hyksos had brought in, right? And it is during this period that the kings officially become called as pharaohs, and it is during this period that Egypt not only gets connected to the outside world, but Egypt becomes imperial, right? You get to have militant god kings who are waging wars against outside powers and foreign enemies. As we will see, these wars bring other kinds of connections, right? I mean, for in the case of Hyksos, they brought out the technological innovations, technological information, new technological achievements of the outside world become integrated into Egypt, and as we will see, the trade of Egypt gets so much expanded that inner Africa, right, becomes in sub-Saharan Africa was connected already to Nubia. Nubia was connected already to Egypt, right? And all of this, right? All of this becomes connected to the Eastern Mediterranean world, to the Fertile Crescent, and to, as we will see, the Minoan and Mycenaean Greeks, right? Now, specifically the Mycenaean Greeks. So during this period, literacy expands, right? Had already expanded during the Middle Kingdom period, but in the New Kingdom, writing and reading, right? More people are able to write and read, and I want you to pay attention, my friends. We're talking about the ancient period, right? We're talking about 3,500 years ago or so, right? Where ancient populations were literate, right? And we have to consider the degree of illiteracy in our modern world when we talk about this, right? Okay, so being connected with the outside world means that you eventually come to have diplomatic relations with them, right? And conduct trade with them, right? You know, conducting trade and diplomatic relations involves the writing of contracts and letters being sort of exchange between kings and pharaohs of Egypt, and bills of sales being used, and so on and so forth. So in each of these empires that we will come across later on also, as well as the empire of the new kingdom Egypt, you have large bureaucratic networks, right? And in the case of new kingdom Egypt, you have one of the most sort of informative period of Egyptian history for us, right? Because we have vast amounts of written material that comes to us from the New Kingdom Egypt, right? So now I want to just consider you to consider just the pyramid of Egyptian society, that by now we have talked about all of them, right? We have talked about the pharaohs, the great house, right? As we will see, the god kings, right? Below whom there are all the government of officials, yeah, that sustain this enormous bureaucracy, under whom are the soldiers who are defending the realm and expanding it. Under that, I want you to keep in mind how important writers and scribes were, right? And then the merchants, and then the artisans and farmers. We have talked about all these groups except for the slaves, and I would like you to read up on the slaves in ancient society, especially in the Egyptian context, from your book. Yeah, my friends. So when you come to the New Kingdom, you see its maximum territorial extent, right? It has once again conquered Nubia and the kingdom of Kush, and it has gotten access to the enormous wealth of Nubia, in the case of in this case gold, right? And you'll see the extent of the empire, right? It reaches, remember my friends, it reaches here for us, here, um, it reaches here for us the Taurus Mountains, right? It begins to get into Anatolia. It gets as far as Anatolia, right? So okay, so it had come into contact with Hyksos that we think might, but they're coming from the land of Canaan, right? So it has come into contact with the Semitic population, right? And you see that it is during this period that it comes across two other great empires of Western Asia, and becomes in contact with them. And we will talk about them, the Hittite and the Assyrian Empire, later, right? So the 18th dynasty of Egypt, yeah, what I want you to keep in mind is that the 18th dynasty of Egypt, right? The new kingdom goes through 18th, 19th, and 20th, right? 18th dynasty of Egypt. I want you to keep in mind. Look at it. You basically are ruling for 300 years here, right? 1550 to 1292, give and take 300 years. So 18th dynasty is a very, 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 very important dynasty in the New Kingdom, right, my friends? And it starts obviously with Ahmose, right? And we know who Ahmose was, right? Ahmose, the one who expelled the Hyksos, right? And then Ahmose, you see, has a number of offsprings, right? Amos's wife, yeah, it's the beautiful Nefertiti, right? And then we get to Amenhotep, and I want you to keep in mind the okay, I want you to keep in mind the Amen in the names of in the name of Amenhotep, right? And then Amenhotep the first, and you see that Amos has another son, Thutmose, right, who marries to Nofret, right, Egyptian Queen Mutnofret, right, and they bear Thutmose the second, right, and and Thutmose and Ahmose, right? I mean, the Thutmose has Hatshepsut as wife, right? And then we get to Thutmose the third and Amenhotep the third, and so on and so forth. And then we get to the Amarna period, and we're going to talk about that. And finally, we get to very important Amenhotep the fourth. I wish you to notice the Amen again in the name, but the name was changed to Akhenaten, and we'll see why. And then again, we see that in the next generation already, you again get Amen, right? These are all the names of the gods, right? That the pharaohs of the 18th dynasty who ruled for close to 300 years bear, right? 19th and 20th dynasty, again, we go to just to get sort of familiar with these names, right? You get Ramses the first, right, and Ramses the second, right, and Seti, right, which are very, very important, and we will see again about them a little bit. And then the 20th dynasty, right? The 20th dynasty actually becomes the Ramsesan dynasty, right? Because it is basically goes from Ramses the second to Ramses the third. I'm sorry, Ramses the third to Ramses the fourth. Where are we? Well, that's the fifth. That's the sixth. That's the eighth. I don't see Ramses the fourth. So he was probably not important, or some other important information about his rule that we are skipping over, right? So, my friends, so New Kingdom 1819 and 20th dynasty, 300 years, 100 years, about, and 100 years, right? That makes the 500 years of the New Kingdom, right? That takes us through the second half of the second millennium, right? Yeah, from 1750s, right, to 11 something, right? We're going to get to it, right? So pharaohs become the great house, meaning pharaoh meaning great house, which is it is the Greek version of the Egyptian Per'a, meaning royal residence, right? Okay, so the New Kingdom period, right? The best known pharaohs of the New Kingdom period are Hatshepsut, right? Thutmose the third, Amenhotep, Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti, and Tutankhamun, right? And 19th dynasty, the Ramses the Great, Seti, and the 20th dynasty, the Ramses, right? So now, okay, this is just giving you some pictorial imagery with which you can conceptualize, right, these figures, these important figures of ancient human history, right? This is Ahmose, right? And his statue, this fragmentary statue, will be is in the Met, right? This is the actual mummified head of Ahmose, right? This is the axe blade of him, and this is the cartouche of his name, right, my friends? Yeah, and this is an image of Ahmose fighting the Hyksos, right? We remember this image, the light chariots of the Hyksos, right? Ahmose basically taking over this technology and fighting the Hyksos with their own technology, so to speak, right? So Ahmose was reared, he was raised by a warrior queen, right? An Egyptian queen, a North African queen, right? Called Ahotep, right? And the son of the Ahmose became Thutmose the first, and Thutmose did something incredible, right? I mean, Thutmose again subdued the Nubians to the south, right? And one of the most important things of a result of it was that um, was that he was able to gain access and control of the Nubian gold that was previously traded, right? But now the new kingdom takes over. Ahmose takes over that wealth, right? Drives deep into Palestine and Syria, as we have seen on the map, and lo and behold, right, Egypt, that was introverted and so somewhat of course not isolated, right? None of these regions were ever isolated, right? We know that our ancient ancestors came out of Egypt, right? Again, during this period they really become connected, right? And Egypt and Ahmose, in fact, excuse me, claims to rule. Remember how deep into Nubia our cataracts went, my friends, right? And you see that Ahmose claims to rule beyond the Nile's fourth cataract, right? From deep into Nubian territory, right, to the bank of Euphrates, right? And as a result of all of this, right, Egypt acquires sort of a strong military presence in Western Asia. North Africa comes to have a strong sort of military presence in Western Asia. Yeah, to put it otherwise, not using the nomenclature of Near East and Middle East and whatnot, right? Okay, so the Hatshepsut was also a very, very interesting figure in the New Kingdom period, in that she was, again, right, as we will see, a warrior queen, right? And in fact, a queen who ruled Egypt strongly and exerted control over Imperial Egypt, right? So for close to 20 years, right? She was the sister and wife of Thutmose II. Yeah, you see, sister and wife, right? So, i.e., brothers and sisters could marry. Why do you think brothers and sisters would marry, or fathers and daughters would marry, or mothers and sons would marry in ancient societies? Who do you think would indulge in this practice, right? I want you to think about it, my friends, yeah? To what purpose are they doing this, right? And the very first thing that comes to mind, right, is what? Is that they wanted to keep wealth in their own family, right? So sister brother marriages, right, are very, very, very common in what? In Egyptian royal family, right? Not for everybody else, the Egyptian royal family. Though this was not the way to produce royal offsprings, right? At any rate, Hatshepsut, right, ruled as pharaoh for 21 years, like her great grandmother Ahotep, right? Hatshepsut was a warrior, right? And but there was something very, very curious about her, and well, not really curious, because you are obviously dealing with a patriarchal society. Ancient societies had matriarchies, my friends, right? But settlement, right? Settlement and the desire to know one's offspring, right? Yeah, made of our societies a patriarchal societies. And why would you want to know your offspring? Right? Again, because you want to keep wealth in your own family, right? So, but anyway, the curious thing about Hatshepsut was she depicted herself not only as a woman, right, but also as a man, right? You see the man with a beard, even, right? But in the writings about her, she is always referred to as a female, right? This is the brother and husband of Hatshepsut, right? In Tartmus, right? In our famous Karnak temple, right? Yeah, routinely depicted with masculine figure and beard, but not a man, right? Inscriptions indicated that he was indicate her gender. She claimed to be the most beautiful woman in the world, right? And her statecraft, right, was crucial to the continuing success of Egypt. And she promoted trade, right, and strongly promoted trade, right? And here you will see that it is trading. She is trading, right? Not only with Arabia, but also with Eastern Mediterranean, right? And but also with the coastal regions of Africa. With whom is she trading during this period in Africa? Well, another naval Afro-Asiatic power, i.e., the Phoenicians, right? And we will get to them as well. Yeah, your picture is getting complicated. Nobody said, my friends, right, that the ancient world had a simple history. No, it had a very, very complicated history. There were balances of power at issue at this point, especially, right? The access to resources, right? In other words, diplomatic relationships, yeah, in international trade. You see in front of you, international trade, right? And I want you to keep in mind, right, that at this point, right, Africa, yeah, is also trading with these itty bitty peninsulas, right? The Greek peninsula, right, of Greece, right, and the Italian one, which is kicking. Yeah, Italy is always kicking Sicily, right, my friends? Yeah, this little thingy here is Sicily. So international trade, right? So never think that your ancient world was a simplistic sort of sort of affair, right, between sort of uncivilized people. No, you have to think of your ancient world as the context for your modern history, right? All this are presentist pretensions to excuse me, global one thing or another is simply that, pretensions, right? Right. Okay, this trade, of course, ushered in decades of prosperity during Hatshepsut's 2 decade of reign for Egypt, right? Excuse me, sometimes this happens. I don't know why this happens in sometimes in my presentations. At any rate, I will fix it for the later periods, my friends. I'm trying to make this concise and not too long, so you won't be bored with my lectures, right? If I had time, I would tell you a joke, but I'm not very good at that, right? If this was a Zoom session, I could have danced for you, perhaps, but okay. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so this is for you the achievements of a female ruler 3,000 years ago in Africa. So I want you to keep in mind that to this day, with all our pretensions, the United States of America, right, has not even come close to having a vice president who is a woman, right, let alone a president. Okay, one other thing that Hatshepsut sort of inaugurated, right, is that she kind of changed the funerary practices of Egyptian society from the buildings of pyramids and whatnot to mortuary temples, right? And one of the most remarkable mortuary temples that she created was the Valley of Kings temples, right, where successive pharaohs were buried there then thereafter, right? It was the New Kingdom's answer to the pyramids, and it was Hatshepsut's doing. So the most beautiful women in the middle of the second millennium BC, right, is Hatshepsut, and who claims to authority over both genders, right? Okay. So this is her temple, right? Again in Luxor, right? In the Valley of the Kings, right? And again, you have to imagine, my friends, that your normal human is this height, right? When you enter the temple, right? So, okay, this again is the statues of Hatshepsut in the Valley of Kings, and you see that again here she is branded with a beard, right? Now, okay, we come to a very, very important phenomenon in the New Kingdom period, right? And that is the growth in the power of the priesthood, right? Why is the priesthood sort of becomes so powerful? We know, of course, that they were one of the centers besides the pharaonic complex, right? The priesthood were the other important sort of center of power for Egyptian society, like the Mesopotamian society, right? But the sort of the defeat of the Hyksos. It starts with the defeat of the Hyksos, and then the imperialism of Egyptians and their access to resources of the other societies that they come into contact, right? For the most part in Eastern Mediterranean and Western Asia and whatnot, right? This brings to the Egyptian society mind-boggling riches, right? It brings prosperity, right? And of course, who do you think claimed to be behind this amazing victories of Egyptians? Of course, they're gods, right? Yeah, I mean, it's never think that we don't use our gods in our contemporary societies for creating warfare, right? And it's no, yeah. I mean, if you think that this is confined to Muslim societies, for instance, my friends, or 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 uh, or I don't know, any other non-Western sort of societies, you better think again, right? Because the history of even our modern period is closely intertwined with our religious thought, right? That is why still we carry coinage that says "In God we trust," right? And you know, when we invaded Iraq, right, it was the Christian God who had helped us, right, invade Iraq. So don't think that that this is some sort of, you know, um, um demoded antiquarian sort of conception, right, that our gods helps us, you know, win over our enemies. No, right? It had, our modern conception has ancient roots, right? So temples and priests, of course, those who were intermediaries between your regular earthlings and the divine gods, right, were temples and priests, as in our modern period, they became rich, right? They became extremely rich, right? Extremely rich. So they became even a stronger center for power. And they started obviously to vie, yeah, with the pharaohs, with the great houses who claimed, remember, divinity themselves, right? Again, I'm sorry here. And please forgive me. This, I didn't pay attention to this one, apparently. Okay. And who was the major god, right, that had made these possible? One of the important gods of Egypt, right? The god of skies, right? Ammon, right? And the father of gods, right? And therefore, the priests of Ammon at Thebes, right, became a formidable force, right? During the Ramessid period, you know, they also gained great influence, right? Um, and how can we appreciate really the power and wealth of Ammon? Well, in the temple of Karnak, right? And remember, I told you in the temple you have to imagine priests and scribes, and I said hundreds of priests, right? Well, we know that in the New Kingdom, in the temple of Ammon in Karnak, there were 80,000 priests. 80,000 priests. Imagine how many mouths to be fed, right? Okay, my friends, here we go again. So the temple of Ammon at Thebes becomes very rich. Thebes, in fact, becomes the capital of the new kingdom, right? Most sacred temple of Thebes, of course, is Karnak, right? And Ammon becomes, right, during this period, the god of very creation itself, right? And 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 around 1550, right, Ammon already becomes identified with the sun god Ra, right? We will see the implications of this. So now this is the god Ammon. Remember, we have briefly touched upon him, and we're going to talk about the gods of Egypt later on when we talk about the gods of Mesopotamia, Mesopotamian gods. And that was the god Ammon, right? And remember, we have talked about the fact that the god Ra, as the sun, right, what had the sun disk, right? Yeah. So this is Ammon Ra. Well, I'm sorry, this is Ra itself, right? The sun disk with the sun disk, but this is Ammon Ra, right? Ammon plus Ra, right? Ammon plus Ra, being the sun, right? Ammon Ra, right? And of course, this is the temple of Karnak, Amun-Ra's temple of Karnak, right? At Karnak temple, right, in Thebes, right? And this is the one in which I asked you, I bid you to imagine the number of priests, and we now know is 80,000, right? And this is again, architectural development. Obviously, all of this wealth meant that there were grand scale architecture, including the one of the Temple of Karnak, right? And here is the Temple of Thutmose. And again, I want you to pay attention to the beautiful colors that have survived to this day, right? So now I want you to see, my friends, that in the middle of the New Kingdom period, based give and take, right? You see that you have a very important pharaoh coming into in the pharaonic sort of dynasties, reigning over Egypt, 1352 to 1336, again around 2 decades, and you see that first it is named, in his name there is the god Amen, right? And his name is Amenhotep, right? Amen is pleased, right? Who inherited a vast, well-governed kingdom, right? Vast, well-governed kingdom in which the power of priesthoods and priesthoods that served all these multiplicity of gods, right, was growing by the day, right? So what better way, right? What better way to do away with the power of these priests than to come up with a new god, right? Yeah. Okay. So, and that's what Amenhotep did, right? And he said, look, the new god, right, is not Amen but Aten, right? And Aten is what? Is the sun, right? And then the sun this Aten is the source of creation. So all of a sudden, in the middle of the 14th century BCE, right? You see, well, we wonder, is this all of a sudden, right? We see a move towards monotheism. Mono, one, theos, God, yeah, mono, we have talked about this, theism, believing in one God, right? And that is the sun God, right? And he goes even further than this, right? And then he says, which means what? Which means that if there is only one God, so to speak, and that is the sun God, right? So what happens to the Pharaoh's divinity? Yeah. Okay. The divinity of Pharaohs, yeah, is decreased, right? As the power of this God, this sole God, is increased, right? But so does, right? So does the power of the priests, the 80,000 so priests who were serving at the temple of Karnak, right? The god Amen, right? So the iconography of Ra of God as falcon, right, is replaced with Aten's sun rays, right, and Amenhotep changes his name to Akhenaten, yeah, he who is profitable to to Aten, right, and he builds a new capital, you know, Akhenaten, right. So well, this is Amenhotep and his mother, right? And now again we get to Akhenaten. Continue with Akhenaten, yeah. Um, so closer, his theology becomes closer uh, to monotheism, right? Aten could not be depicted as taking human or animal form, which was the custom before, right? Uh, um, Akhenaten himself, yeah, human depictions without gods sort of imposing on him or anything except for the god, excuse me, Ra, right? And together, Akhenaten, together with his beautiful wife, right, yet another beautiful African queen, Nefertiti, and their children become the worshippers of Aten, right? So this becomes uh, dangerous to the ideology of royal power, right, and multiplicity of the gods, right. It becomes dangerous to the power of all these priests, right, and therefore Akhenaten's revolution had enormous political implications, right. Well, what does this priesthood, right, that has been become so rich as a result of the riches of Egypt, right? What happens to them when their power is destroyed? Well, they exert strenuous resistance, right? And since Akhenaten did not pursue Egypt's interests uh, abroad either, he supported the he lost the support of nobility. He didn't have the support of the priesthood any longer, right? So he was succeeded by his younger son Tutankhaten, right? But yeah, once again, you see that he begins with Aten in his name, right? Tutankhaten, his son, begins by Aten in his name, but as we will see, he changes very quickly his name, right, to a name that reflects the major god of Egyptians before Sun Ra, namely Amen, right? So here is Akhenaten, right, or Amarna. So this period is also known as the Amarna period of Egyptian New Kingdom, right? And the capital that Akhenaten had constructed, right, was later abandoned, right, and this is Akhenaten's beautiful wife, Nefertiti, right? And this is the house altar of Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their daughters, their three daughters, circa 1350 BCE, right? For middle of the 14th century BCE. This is another depiction of the family worshipping Aten, and you see the sun and the rays of the sun here, right? And here is once again Akhenaten and Nefertiti late in the rule, right? And this is another small temple of Aten at Akhenaten, right? And remember, I told you when you see temples, right, you have to also imagine scribes in the temples, right? Well, these are the scribes, children with papyrus, right, and pen, right, and the relief is what is from the Amarna period, from the temple of Akhenaten, right, which Akhenaten had uh, constructed. right? His son, I believe it was his son, Tutankhaten, right, that replaces his father, is only a child of 9 years old. That means what? That means that you can be sure other people are ruling in his stead, the nobility are ruling in his stead, perhaps the priesthood are ruling in his stead. So, and he rules, and because he's only 9 years old, right? So they change his name from Tut, Tutan, Tutankhaten, i.e., with Aten in the sun in the name, right? Again, the name is changed to Tutankhamen, right? With the god Amen returning, right, to 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 ascendancy, right? Okay, so this is Tutankhamun's death mask, which is very, very familiar to you. Now you know what it is and what is the significance of Tutankhamun, right? And you can tell your friends and acquaintances that hello, the importance of the death mask of Tutankhamun, right? Um, After Tutankhamun comes Horemheb, right? Comes Horemheb. Well, where else you find his statue but in Vienna, right? Um, so Horemheb, right? Horemheb is the last pharaoh of the 18th century, right? 18th dynasty, right? And he was a general, right? Um, and after his death, right, the rule passes to another general, right? I.e., therefore, you're not talking about the royal family now, right? But a general who begins another royal family, i.e., the 19th dynasty, right? Ramses would restore Egypt's glory, right, in the Near East after Akhenaten has, sort of neglected his political and economic endeavors of his empire, right? So the 19th dynasty again, founded by Ramses, right? Continued the works of his predecessors in adding to the temple of uh, Amen, right? And he was old. Ramses was an elderly man when he came to power, so he authorized Seti to carry out military expeditions and to win back the territories that were lost during the Amarna period. And this is a picture of a picture depicting Ramses, I mean the head of Ramses, and this is Seti, right, in charge of recreating the empire, and then after him becomes Ramses the second, known as Ramses the Great, right? And who during whose reign we have a brilliant sort of renaissance, right, of Egyptian history during the reign of Ramses the Great. And I wish you to see we're coming to the end of our Middle Kingdom period. We're getting to it little by little, right? And you see that okay, that Ramses the second rules during the 13th century BCE. Well, the 13th century BCE, he is supposed to have been identical to the unnamed pharaoh in the Bible, right, during whose time the Exodus takes place. Well, but we know we have so much. Remember, we said that this is the most well documented period of Egyptian history. We know that there was no such a thing as there is no any mention of, Hebrew slaves, plagues, or the mass migration of upward of 500,000 people from Egypt, right? During the Ramses the Great's empire. So we know that the Exodus story, if there is any truth to it, and we will get to the truth of our biblical stories, or the comparative truth, if you will, of our biblical story soon, yeah, in our religion segment. So here we go. This is Ramses' mummy, right? This is the depiction of Ramses at Abu Simbel, which is a village in the Egyptian part of Nubia, right? And this, yeah, my friends, this is Abu Simbel temple of Ramses. And again, I want you to know we are yay big, right, compared to it, or that's even too high. I think, I don't know, maybe this big, this tall. Okay. So yeah, okay. So that is as far as Ramses is concerned. Let's okay. This is again the temple of a temple of Ramses, right? But this is Ramses the first at Abu Simbel, right? So and you remember, okay, so Ramses, this is again the height of Egyptian empire, right? It has extended again into Eastern Mediterranean, and it has covered most of Eastern Mediterranean, and lo and behold, not yo and behold, yeah, lo and behold, they come across another people, right? Another people, but these people are not the possibly Semitic group of populations that when we were dealing with the first foreigners that come to Egypt, the Hyksos namely, but these are the Hittites, an Indo-European population that they have created an empire of their own, right, during this period. Remember, this is the age of empire, great land-based empires, right? The second millennium BC is the age of great land-based empires, right? So anyway, Ramses defeats the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh in 1274. We will learn more about the Hittites, and he also stops an invasion by the Sea People, whose identity it is not still clear. We suspect perhaps potentially they were the Phoenicians. We don't know, right? I must say I'm not up to date on the research on this, my friends. Yeah. So okay, it's already 1 hour. I want to sort of end here. And we talked about the achievements of Ramses. One of the things that I want you to know is that he built a capital called Avaris in the Delta, right, on the eastern parts of the Delta, right? Perhaps he was trying to blend Egyptian culture with that of Syria, Palestine, right? And from the Hittites, again, the Egyptian get new, even lighter chariots, new war technology, right? And here, of course, you have, as you had the depiction of Ahmose, right? Sort of defeating the Hyksos under the foot of their chariots. Here too you have in the temple of Ramses the second, in Luxor, right after his victory against the Hittites at the city of Kadesh, and we will see all of this, right? They are being crushed beneath the wheels of Egyptian warfare. So I will leave you at this, and I beg you to keep in mind that, yeah, the Egyptian Empire has come, not yet, not really, but close to the Taurus Mountains, right? And I want you to look at this empire that it with which it comes into contact, yeah, an Indo-European population, right, with which we will be dealing in our next sessions. Okay, my friends, I hope you have stopped and gone back to this a video so that you won't get tired, right? And I hope you feel even more enlightened, I hope, than before. And until our next video, I bid you farewell, and I wish you splendid days and nights in good health, my friends. Bye.